All right. He for she has been getting a lot of attention these days.
Indeed.
And I was just wondering, just in general though, UN women now, have they been shifting their priorities in the MeToo era?
Not shifting necessarily, but I think there is a clear strategy in terms of understanding what needs to happen. And what needs to happen is that we need to build an inclusive movement. For a very long time, gender has often been seen as a woman issue led by women for women, and yet we also know that men make half of the world's population, and of course there's other genders in between as well. So the biggest focus for UN Women now is to look at how we can build a solidarity movement for gender equality, inviting men and boys to be part of the solution so that we don't often look at men as the problem, especially in the MeToo era.
Right, well the MeToo era has gotten a tremendous amount of power now in this country, but is it really relevant to women in the developing world as well?
Absolutely. I think what's interesting about the MeToo movement is the opportunity that women now feel that they have to be able to speak out about their experiences. For a very long time it's been very difficult. You know, you sort of feel isolated if you've been part of the sexual harassment incident, and I think that alone has been quite empowering for women around the world, and the MeToo movement in particular has grown. It's not just an American thing now, it's around the world, and giving women the voice to say, me too, this has happened to me.
I was going to ask that, are there some good examples of where it's really taken hold in any particular countries or areas?
So I'm not really the best person to speak to it, because MeToo movement has its own organization, but we do work with them very closely. We know that it has really empowered women around the world to be able to speak up and find some healing, which is very much needed as well.
I wanted to cover a little more about UN Women, just some ideas. It would seem to me that there should be a real focus on rural women and rural issues here. Is that still a priority for the UN Women?
Indeed. So as you know, every single year we hold what's called the Commission Status for Women, where we gather ministers of gender and NGOs working on women's rights issues into New York here at the UN. And this year, the theme for the CSW was actually indeed on rural women. It's a huge priority for us in terms of even looking at climate smart agriculture for those women that are responsible for really putting food in our stomachs. So yes, it's a big issue for UN Women, a priority.
Have there been any dramatic changes lately in the UN Women program?
I think the biggest thing that the executive director, so we have this incredible visionary leader called Phumzile Mhlabangquka, a former freedom fighter from South Africa, and one of the things that she learned through the anti-apartheid era was the need for solidarity and inviting everyone to the table. So one of her big focus has been to look at how we can expand the constituency for gender equality. We're inviting the media, we're inviting men and boys, we're inviting religious leaders and traditional leaders, and again, sort of really expanding our scope of work and the partners that can help us to fight this issue of gender inequality.
Well, that takes me through he for she.
Yes.
And the he portion, getting more men involved.
Correct.
And bringing men to the table to share in this effort. I would think that seems to be the priority.
Well, that's a big priority, because again, I think if you look at the reality that women make half of the world's population, men also make the other half, except they also hold the majority of the power. So instead of sort of doing the traditional way of looking at what is different between men and women, and we are trying to find a way to really create an important solidarity with the men that hold those powers in order for them to support in being part of the solution. So we're engaging heads of states and global CEOs and university presidents. We're engaging them as part of an initiative called the He for She Impact Initiative, where it is a 50-50 by 2020. They have to define game-changing parity commitments that they can drive for by 2020, so that again, you know, we accelerate progress for gender equality. We can break the glass ceiling as women, but men can simply remove it because they put it there. That's how I like to see things.
Well, I would think your priority would be in conflict resolution, because we have so many instances where women they don't have a place at the table, and certain countries around the world, places where, you know, conflict is very significant, I would guess they're not part of the negotiating team.
No. In fact, there's gender disparity everywhere. I mean, this is actually what the challenge is for UN Women, is there's no space, whether it's economically, socially, politically, where women are equally represented. And indeed, in the peace and security topic, which is one of our pillars as UN Women, we often find that women are usually the face that you see in refugee camps, yet they are missing from the negotiation tables. They are missing not only in peace resolution, but also prevention of conflict. The UN is very much focused on getting more women in peace and security. Even our own UN peacekeepers, there's a big push to have more women there. We work with Finland, one of our impact champions. The president is one of the he for she impact champion, with a particular focus also on peace and security. We need more women there.
Can you point to a success here?
Yes.
Is there an opportunity to show whether it's really worked?
So, I mean, again, there are many examples that we can speak to. The biggest thing, though, that I can point to, in particular on the he for she movement, is that we work with Georgetown University. They have the Center for Peace and Security, and one of the critical things that they are currently developing is an index, a global index that ranks countries in terms of how they approach their peace and security agenda. Iceland itself as well is training more female peacekeepers, and they are, on Wednesday, the president will be here at the He for She Summit to share some of the early successes that they've seen. So we know that it works. We know that when women are involved in peacekeeping.
We were talking about some of the success that you've had with UN Women, and I mentioned conflict resolution, really becoming an equal part in the negotiation, whether it's political, social, health issues. Are there areas where just there's a tremendous amount of work that needs to be done, where you need to refocus your energy?
So there's two, I think, important things with regards to peace and security. Number one is we need more women there, but the number two is also we need to make sure that the men that are there are supportive of equality. You know, we have our UN peacekeepers. One of the important work of UN Women has been working with DPKO, the UN entity on peace and security, to provide gender training to the army, so that again they are part of the solution in line with the He for She movement.
How about advances in basic issues for young women, healthcare, family planning?
Yes. So again, we work very closely with our sister agency, UNFPA, to make sure that women have access to reproductive health services. But again, even there, one of the critical areas for us is to work with men and boys, because we know I come from a small village in Zimbabwe, and most of the women in my community, and that's relevant for most women around the world, is that it is actually the men who makes the decision in terms of how many children the woman should have, what contraceptive, if any, she should be utilizing. So it's also important that we are not only focused on changing the mindsets of the women and girls who already obviously want to be empowered, but it's also looking at how men can be part of that solution. They can be part of supporting and understanding why it's important, because we know that when women thrive, communities thrive, and men are part of those communities.
Well, certainly those are important issues, but taking it one step further now,
yes.
Job training,
yes,
appreciation of career development,
yes,
that sort of thing. I mean, these are issues also as well.
Yes, indeed. So whether it's now looking at one of, again, is we look at the industrial revolution and the tech, we are also looking at, as young women, in terms of STEM. How do we make sure that women are prepared, young girls are trained for what the new skill sets are going to require for the job market? But we also work on traditional training. One of the biggest initiatives that we have is with UNICEF and UNESCO and World Bank, looking at how we can give young girls a second chance to education. A lot of the young girls fall off after primary school, and there is a gap where nobody has really been looking at what can be done there, and we are working as one UN to deliver for those young girls and training them on job-specific skills.
Your new headline these days, More Powerful Together.
Absolutely.
All right? And I know you have an event later in the week here at the UN.
Yes.
Why don't you just tell me a little bit about the priorities there, if that's different than the He for She.
Yes. So one of the things that we did this morning was to launch a campaign called More Powerful Together, which was it's a big campaign to look at how we can make people realize, in a very simple metaphor, by lightening the sort of iconic buildings like the Empire State just half, putting the lights half to show them the loss that the world has when we lose half of our potential, which is women. So that's what the campaign is. It's driving again for that equality, for that solidarity message that gender equality isn't a woman issue, it's a humanity issue, and we're all part of that human race, and we all need to work together.
You've engaged a lot of people from the business community, diplomatic community, well-known media celebrities. What's the next step in that movement?
The biggest step for the movement, which is what's happening this Wednesday, is solutions, solutions, solutions. We know that there is an appetite for gender equality right now, whether it's the MeToo movement, it's where we have this critical moment and excitement about what needs to happen and what needs to change. One of the things that we have found with the He for She movement is that people are often looking for solutions. They just want to know what can they do to support. So this Wednesday, we are launching our first solutions for gender equality, proven, through the work of the Impact Champions. So that's the big focus. We've got to put solutions in the hands of people. We need to accelerate progress, and that begins with looking at what the men themselves can do to be part of that.
Oh, thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much.
Sounds like a very enthusiastic program.
Thank you very much, Bob. Thank you for having me.